Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Paul Aguilar, host of the Truth Defender podcast. Before this episode gets started, I just wanted to give you guys a heads up. While recording this episode, I had some issues that I wasn't aware of at the time of recording with my microphone. Now, you can hear me, just not very well in some areas. It sounds like I'm underwater. It's just really bad. That was an issue that I had on my end. I just didn't have everything set up the way I needed to have it, which is extremely disappointing because Mr. Dennett's interview was great. He had a lot of great stories, a lot of great topics that we were discussing as well. And I completely screwed it up on my end. Now you can still hear him perfectly. He came out with no issue. Which is one of the reasons why I decided to go ahead and air the episode. It was because you could hear every story that he had completely fine. It was just my end. So you'll hear me just mumbling and my audio is just really crappy. But like I said, you can hear me. It's a little hard. If you kind of pay attention, you can hear, what I'm talking about. Extremely upsetting. It was a great episode. Preston's new book, Wondrous, is great. If you guys have a chance to buy it, go ahead and do that. Read the stories. I might have him back on, and we might redo the episode again if he has time. And it just really sucks that I just screwed it up because we had a great conversation as well at the beginning of the episode, talking about all the new disclosure that was coming out by the Pentagon, by the Navy, the videos that they released, documents, the government sort of half-heartedly admitting that there are UFOs, that they are monitoring them, they are coming into our airspace, and all that kind of stuff, and they kind of really don't know what they are. So that was kind of the first 20 minutes of the episode. And then he jumped into all the stories after that. He had about 3 or 4 great stories. 15-foot tall praying mantis is one of them. That's completely ridiculous. UFOs coming out of the water, in the ocean, stuff like that. So just really great stories. I just wanted to apologize before it got started, just to let you guys know that it is going to be an issue for you guys to maybe hear a little bit, but it's only on my end, like I mentioned. Next time, I'll be sure to have everything set up correctly. It wasn't like a technical issue or anything, having issues with the mic or anything. It was just like the setup that I had. There were some incorrect settings that were going on. So that was completely on my end. I really apologize. I really appreciate you guys stopping in for another episode. I know it's been a while. We're going to be ramping up. I know I always say that, but this time it's starting July, towards the middle of July. We're going to be rocking and rolling 100%. I'm going to try to be doing a couple of episodes a week, maybe, if not once a week. And then kind of depending on where we end up towards the end of the year, maybe once every other week with some high strangeness episodes kind of sprinkled in the middle as well. But if you guys, like I mentioned before, like always, if you guys have any questions or anything like that for myself or a guest, if you want me to bring on a guest, if you want to hear us speak about a certain topic, let me know. You can shoot us an email, thetruthDefender1776@gmail.com. We're kind of playing around with a bunch of social media sites right now. I don't want to charge anything. I know a lot of people do Patreon and stuff like that. Have like tiers where you pay for certain content, stuff like that. I don't want to do that. I just want to speak with people, get the content out, so that way you guys can listen to it. No charge or anything like that. Although that we might run into an area where that may be a thing. We just launched on locals.com. If you guys have heard of that, I'm not exactly sure how that works. I've never used it before, but I do know that there's like a subscription thing that they have where you have to subscribe to your favorite people or shows or whatever you do. I think there's an area on there where you can set how much a subscription is. So like on my end, I'm going to try and if I can get like the least possible amount that you can do, hopefully it's like $1 or something, or maybe less. Hopefully, like I said, I don't want to be charging anybody for anything, so that'll be that. Yeah, we just started on Twitch. This episode was the first one we started with on Twitch. It was great. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook is all still there. We have a Discord. So yeah, I mean, all that'll be linked down below, as well as the information for Mr. Dennett's new book on his website as well. Stop on in, pick it up. Should be good. But yeah, so you guys take a look at that. And once again, I really apologize for the episode. I'll get my shit together next time. We'll have everything set up perfectly. Yeah, so coming up shows, we're going to have Mr. Bean back on. Reverend Bill Bean. We'll be discussing the Mandela effect this time. We're just going to have a lot of guests maybe making a reappearance, and some new guests as well. So you guys stay tuned for that. Thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate it. You guys stay safe out there, stay blessed, and like always, stay frosty.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Truth Defender podcast. We are coming to you from the greatest country in the world, deep in the heart of the Lone Star State, Dallas, Texas. I'm your host, Paul Aguilar. I really appreciate you guys stopping in. If you guys are not already a YouTube subscriber, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. Also hit that thumbs up button as well. If you guys are on the go and you want to check us out, you can find us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, as well as iHeart Radio, Truth Defender Podcast. If you guys want to follow us on our social media, you can find us on Twitter at Defender Podcast, Instagram, Truth Defender Podcast, as well as Facebook, Rumble, our Discord as well. If you guys have any questions for myself or our guests or topic recommendations, you can shoot us an email over at truthDefender1776@gmail.com. Our guest today was on the show early on, appearing on episode 4, all the way back to July 1st, so it's almost a year now, of 2020, where we discussed his book, Onboard UFO Encounters. He's a field investigator for the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, the ghost hunter, paranormal researcher, and the author of 26 books and more than 100 articles on UFOs and the paranormal. We're grateful to have him back on today to discuss his latest book, Wondrous, 25 True UFO Encounters. Without further ado, Mr. Preston Dennett. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Doing really good. How are you?
Not too bad. We've been slowly getting on here. As I mentioned, it's been almost a year since you were here last July of 2020. So we're coming up here quickly on the 1st. So I remember you back then speaking about you were going to be coming out with a new book at that point. It's funny here. So when did that book actually come out? When did it release?
This latest one just came out last month, so it's still hot off the press. Yeah.
Yeah, I was reading through some of the stories. We're obviously not going to be going through the whole book. If everybody that wants to know what's in the book, you obviously have to buy it. But looking through some of the stories and stuff, some of them were kind of really stuck out. There were some really crazy stories. Just reading the title of some of the stories, I was already intrigued. So I just kind of picked out maybe like 2 or 3 that we can maybe go through a little bit. For everybody else that wants to know what's in the rest of the book, obviously you have to buy it. But before we get to the book, I kind of want to get your thoughts. Obviously, in the past 2 or 3 months or so, it's been kind of heavy in the news. I'm sure you're aware that the Pentagon and them have been releasing a whole bunch of documents and videos talking about UFOs, as well as the Navy. Having been in the Navy, this is nothing new to me. We've always heard rumblings and things like that, and there's a lot of people that have seen things, and like you speak with guys in ships and stuff like that, and you just hear like a lot of stories. So that's that aspect of it wasn't as surprising to me. But the Pentagon coming out and saying, not in certain terms that they believe in UFOs or that there's UFOs out there, but just that they have been watching out for UFOs in the past. I'm always drawn to the time frame of when these things start to come out. Are you surprised that they actually kind of sort of under their breath admitted to there actually being UFOs out there, or that they were actually studying UFOs?
Yeah, I'm shocked, surprised, and I'm pretty happy about it. I'm not sure I trust them a whole lot. It's been a long time they've been lying about this, covering it up. So I'm a little bit nervous about what exactly is going on behind the scenes here. But it is movement. They are talking about it, and that's good news. There's a lot of people who've not taken UFOs seriously because our government has not said anything about it. So now a lot of people are taking a second look at this and digging into the evidence, and I think that's probably the best part of what all of this is bringing about. But we'll see. I mean, it all depends on what they actually reveal, and I'm very curious to see how they move forward with this. But I'm a little, I've been in this field for 35 years, and I'm jaded. I have to tell you, I just they've for so long they've covered this up, and I just don't expect a complete reversal. I expect they'll probably do a few baby steps here and there, but I'm really hoping they go as far as to say that they know what this is, because I think they do. I think they know it's aliens. I think they know it's extraterrestrials. But I don't foresee them doing that. I really don't. I think they're going to fall just short of that. Honestly, I think it's to their benefit to say aliens, but we'll see.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that I was kind of wondering, for people that have been in the UFO field like yourself, and other people that have been doing research for years, you obviously don't need any confirmation that they're out there, because you've been putting in the work as well. So but the fact that they've just kind of come out lately and, oh yeah, well, we've kind of been watching them a little bit here and there throughout the years. Like people like yourself, it's not a surprise. But for other people that don't really pay attention to it too much, or for all the people that think that it's not true, it's obviously had to have hit them kind of like a ton of bricks. But even with all the videos coming out and everything, and everybody doing podcasts like that, I'm just a little surprised that it hasn't hit bigger. Nobody really seems to care. It's like it's in the news, but you still don't hear a whole lot about it from people, especially other people that I know that I've been discussing with for a long time, and people that I don't believe in it. Even they're just like, oh yeah, well, it was in the news, but I still kind of don't really think it's true. That's kind of been the weird part about it, is that even though it's in the mainstream now, officially, there hasn't been any kind of uproar about it. It's still not something that speaks about, which is weird.
Yeah, I think if the government even says flat out they are aliens, there's going to be people who don't believe it. But I'm hoping, ultimately the end game of disclosure would be full disclosure, showing us the Roswell craft, which I think we do have, alien bodies, much better film than what we've seen so far. Hardware. I believe that they've said that. The Pentagon did release a statement at one point. We have materials from otherworldly vehicles. So show us the materials. And until we see that, I don't think disclosure is going to affect people in any profound way.
Yeah. It's just kind of a weird thing. Watching like in the news, you see like on Fox News, and you see it on all these like major news networks and stuff. And it's like nobody is just like, well, yeah, it's not a big deal. It's like, this is a huge deal. Like I mentioned, for a lot of people like yourself, you already knew this stuff was out there, but for other people, it's huge. You know, obviously these things that we know of don't come from anything here on Earth that we're aware of. Where they come from, who knows? But it's just confirmation that there's something else out there, and that a lot of people don't have to feel like they're crazy anymore. For a lot of people, it's got to be a relief, you know, for them. Like, hey, I've been telling you guys this for years, and now it's finally out. Like, I'm not a liar, so that's got to feel good for a lot of people. I can imagine.
Well, they're just talking about sightings here.
Yeah.
And let's face it, they've come a lot closer than that. There's a lot of landing cases. The Lonnie Zamora landing in Socorro, New Mexico. What happened at Rendlesham at Bentwaters, England. There's a lot of really good landing cases. I would like to hear them talk about that. And at some point, they're going to have to broach the subject of onboard UFO encounters. People who are, you know, contactees. People who are having face-to-face contact. The whole, you know, UFO abduction phenomenon will at some point have to be a topic of discussion. It's a can of worms for them. I think this is something that a lot of people are going through. So that's why I think they're going to be reluctant to really label this as extraterrestrial, when really they do know. And I think if they don't, you know, if they don't go there, it's going to be disingenuous. I'm not sure people will trust them, because most people know what UFOs are. When someone says UFO, they mean alien craft. So just say it. Say it. It's not that hard. They know it. You know, that's why I'm in this field. That's why I'm so obsessed with this. People need to know the truth. And UFOs are real. Aliens are real. We are not alone. It's all it takes is just a simple look at the evidence, and anyone can figure this out. The evidence is mountainous. It is overwhelming. It's not just eyewitness testimonies. There are radar return cases, landing trace cases. People have been physically affected, whether it's, you know, burns or injuries or healings, which are actually, I think, more common. But all kinds of reactions. I mean, they shut down cars. They, you know, animal reaction cases, angel hair, you know, where they release this sort of cotton candy-like substance. There's all kinds of really good physical evidence. I mean, we have implant removal cases. Let's hear the government talk about that. I'd love to see that.
It's just odd. I mean, this Navy one really struck me. I mean, I'm not surprised. Like I mentioned, I've spoken to a lot of people during my time in the Navy, and even afterwards. A lot of people that I know, they're still on ships and things like that. They go out to like 8-month cruises, and they're out in the middle of the ocean and stuff like that. And you see things. You're standing watch, 12 o'clock at night, 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the ocean. You see things. I've spoken to a lot of people, some kind of experience, not just enlisted people, but people that have commissions in the Navy, ensigns, lieutenant commanders, captains. I've spoken to a lot of people that don't want to say anything publicly. I've never asked them to. I completely understand, because that kind of thing, when you're in, do anything to jeopardize your career, and that would definitely kill your career extremely quickly. So I understand completely. But one thing I've always wondered is, obviously out there in the middle of the ocean, I think for myself personally, we're probably looking, instead of looking into space, I think we need to look into the oceans. For a lot of them, we spend a lot of time trying to go into space, investigate space, which is great, but we know pretty much absolutely nothing about what's underneath our oceans. I think that a lot of people stories about UFOs coming out of the ocean and stuff like that I've heard from people. It's definitely possible. If you're being on a ship in the middle of the ocean, you understand that you can hide ships under the ocean, and nobody would even know that they were down there. I'm pretty sure you've had other stories like that as well. But
yeah, well, I've definitely looked into that.
Yeah, definitely should be looking under the water a lot more.
lots of USO accounts, unidentified submersible objects. And I've interviewed some Navy guys. I mean, one guy I interviewed with Ray Sachs. He was an electrician's mate on the USS Clamagore, a Navy submarine. And in 1971, he was on lookout with another petty officer. The commander was on board as well. I mean, they were on top of the surface, traveling about 12 knots, the second in command. And this USO showed up, paced the submarine for 15 minutes, came zooming up from the stern at almost 100 knots, right alongside the sub, did not appear on sonar. And a bunch of other major officers came up on deck because they wanted to take a little look at it. And yeah, paced their submarine for 15 minutes before darting off in another direction at about 80 knots, I believe. And the second in command turns to the commander and says, "How do you want me to report this?" And the commander says, "People who report incidents like these do not move up in rank." Direct quote. According to the guy I interviewed, Ray, who was listening in, of course. Yeah, I mean, it was the buzz of the whole crew for a long time afterwards.
Definitely, I know those sub guys. They get a lot of crazy things. They're under the water 6-7 months at a time, and you can hear through the bulkheads, and you can hear like whales on the other side, and you can hear all kinds of things underwater, radar, stuff like that. It's just I don't know, living underwater for 6-7 months at a time, maybe even more. I'm insane, but they do it, so it's a good thing they're out there because I couldn't do it. But yeah, I mean, so we'll jump in here to a few of the stories from the latest book, Wondrous, 25 True UFO Encounters. So obviously, one of the ones that really struck me right off the bat was the school teacher that had that 15-foot tall mantis encounter when she was jogging. That one, just without even reading the story, when I first read the title, automatically I was just like, this is like the craziest thing I've ever seen. I've always heard of not 15-foot tall ones, but I've heard stories of people seeing them and stuff like that. But that's just like crazy, on the surface. So if you can maybe kind of explain a little bit without giving us too much.
Yeah, no worries. It's a great case. She was a really interesting lady. Gave a great interview. I mean, she's really intelligent, very forthcoming, and just had this amazing story to tell. She actually contacted me because she couldn't find any other accounts like hers, but finally found one in one of my previous books. A Navy medic, actually, I had interviewed, had a similar encounter. But what happened to her occurred in 2006. She likes to go jogging early in the morning. I mean, really early, 4:30 a.m. outside her home in O'Fallon, Illinois. It's a pretty rural area. And went out jogging with her dog, like she normally does. Goes jogging down her street, heads up another street, up a third street, and is coming to this little T intersection. I think the street was called Illini, and the T intersection was Kyle Road. And there's a little, not a little, a big street light right at the corner there. And suddenly her dog stops, pricks up its ears, and looks ahead. So she stops. She's thinking it's going to be a deer or a coyote or something, which wasn't unusual. But instead, she saw what looked like she thought it was a man in a costume wearing stilts and extenders on his arms. That was her first impression. But then this thing, which is heading towards the right, walks right under the streetlight. And she gets a real shock. It's obviously not a man. It had a very bug-like appearance, and it took her a second to sort of wrap her head around it, but it was a praying mantis, 15 feet tall. And she knows it was 15 feet tall because it was right there next to the streetlight and kind of real close to the top of it. And dark gray, it was walking quite quickly, taking big, long strides. It had very long, stick-like limbs, and it was sort of marching real quickly with its front arms sort of going back and forth, pumping, and its head was pointed down, and it was scanning the road back and forth, back and forth. She had the impression it was looking for something. That makes me curious. Did it drop something? I don't know. But she saw it. Her dog saw it. It walked pretty quickly by, and she ran after it. Ran up to the intersection there and saw it disappear off into the darkness pretty quickly. And she saw it actually turn off into the field, and that's when she lost track of it. But it definitely threw her for a loop, to say the least. I mean, she could hardly believe what she saw. She did, after she went home, told her family. They were very supportive. She went back there during daylight to, measure it against the street light. She's like, I'm about 5'5", and this thing, was way, way taller than her. She estimates 15 feet. And I asked her, I'm like, well, why this area? Is there anything here that you could think of that might, relate to this or be significant? She says, well, it's really just a rural area. There's, lots of cornfields. There's a school, Fulton Junior High School is right near there. She said, there is one thing though. Just to the southeast of her is Scott Air Force Base. And when she said that, I instantly thought of a famous UFO encounter, which had occurred actually just, 6 years earlier, year 2000, where a UFO skirted right by there. I mean, between her and Scott Air Force Base. So less than, 5 to 10 miles away. And also I found out, looking at the date of her encounter, that was around very close to the same time as the Chicago O'Hare airport sighting, which turns out to be about 300 miles away, which is kind of far for a human, but for an ET or UFO, not far at all. So don't know if that's significant or not, but I thought it was worth mentioning, to say the least.
Yeah, the fact that you said Air Force Base around there, automatically I would snap to some things. There's something up with that area as well. It's 15 feet tall. It's just disappearing into like the field, and stuff like that. Definitely odd. I mean, she's a lot braver than I would be. I wouldn't run for sure. Nothing that's 15 foot tall. It's walking around. I wouldn't be running up towards it either.
Not try to run after it.
No, she's definitely a lot braver than I am. I would never do that. That's crazy. I mean, 4:30 in the morning, jogging outside, stuff like that. So I mean, it's definitely one of those times where there's obviously nobody around outside, especially like in a rural area like that. There's no foot traffic. There's no cars out there. Really, so it would be a great spot for them to be out there. But like you said, they were looking around on the ground. Definitely curious as well as to if they were just looking for something or they were just kind of pacing back and forth and just how bugs do.
Yeah, it was weird. She didn't see any UFO. She went jogging the next day, didn't see it. Never saw it again. But there was another case, very similar, about 40 miles away, involving a gentleman who saw a praying mantis crossing the road late at night. It was on all fours, but she did some research and found that case. And I started talking to her. I'm like, thinking this is a one-off. Maybe when someone sees an ET that close, usually I think they're aware of it. And she's like, no, I don't think it saw me. I honestly don't. And I'm like, well, have you had any other encounters? And she says, well, she has. As a young girl, she had figures entering into her bedroom, little short. Like she can't say they were grays or what they were. She didn't really see them. It was very dark. She was just a little girl. But it happened over and over and over again. Enough times where she'd scream out for her parents. They'd come running in and never saw anything, but finally told her to stop, stop waking us up. yeah, I mean, and she did have one, what she called a nightmare. Now she's thinking it was probably a real experience, where she woke up and she was on a metal bed, and there was figures around her. She had a sheet over her, but she could see them. And they pulled off the sheet, and she could see these figures with like white smocks. They looked like doctors, but she could not see their faces. But they were carrying sort of these trays filled with surgical instruments, and said that they were going to do an operation to fix her, and that scared her. Uh, she ended up having some anxieties after that for a while. But yeah, definitely, she's what I would call an experiencer. So I'm not sure if this was a coincidence that she saw this praying mantis or not, uh, because she has had other encounters.
It's definitely odd. Like, you mentioned that the gentleman who had seen it as well was walking on all four legs. So the one that she saw, was it standing on two legs walking around? Is that how that was? Why it was so tall, or was it just was it walking around on four legs as well?
The other gentleman who saw it, no, said it was crossing the road and it was walking on all four legs. Actually,
Okay.
could not tell how tall it was. And I have to tell you, most of the people I talk to who have seen this type of figure do not describe it as 15 feet tall. They would normally describe it as maybe 8 to 9 feet tall, 7. I haven't even heard 10 feet. 9 feet was pretty much the higher end, except for a few outlying cases. And one's a Navy medic, I mean, a great witness, trained observer. I asked him, "Are you sure that what you saw was 15 foot tall?" He says, "Listen, it was right next to me. It was touching my shoulder. I had to crane my head straight up to see it." He's almost 6 feet tall, and it was well more than twice his height. So he's pretty sure that he's not exaggerating. He said his eyes alone were as big as basketballs. So, and it just radiated intelligence. He saw 3 of them, actually. Uh, and he was taken on board a craft. So, yeah, praying mantis is one of the type of figures I hear fairly often. Usually it's grays or some variation of it. Human looking is not unusual, and same with praying mantis. But after that, there's all kinds of strange humanoids, some that are just completely unique. I mean, there's one case in this book involving 10-foot tall humanoids, which the way he described it, I've never heard them before.
The stories that I hear of bugs like that, those would freak me out more than anything. The grays obviously would be creepy and stuff. Like other humanoids, maybe not so much. But when it comes to like bugs like that, I mean, those kind of stories, to see them like in real life, I'm freaked out. Anything to do with bugs really is just not my alley. So I could just imagine seeing giant ones that would be even worse.
Yeah, can you imagine people who don't like bugs anyway, and then to see one that's 10 foot tall? Your little can of Raid is not going to help much on something that big.
I'm definitely one of those people that don't like blue wall, so um, seeing a giant one happen, it's a heart attack. Yeah, it's kind of that. Those kinds of stories I always find interesting. That was definitely an interesting one. Just the mere fact that even if she had just only seen it for like a split second or whatever, just the fact that it was out there in the middle of the night looking for something, it's like a whole another crazy story that I would like to know what was going on out there. But I mean, you spoke of Air Force bases. One of the other ones that stories in the book as well was the construction worker that was working at Edwards Air Force Base. And it's the one that he looked in a hangar and saw something that he wasn't supposed to see. That story was one of the ones that was in there as well that I was looking at. It was real interesting that you could go little bit into detail on that one as well.
Yeah, that was a very interesting case. This is a gentleman who contacted me because he was actually in the hospital on his deathbed. Honest to God, this was what we would call a deathbed confession. So I felt a lot of responsibility to get his story out. He really wanted to do his part to aid in disclosure because what he saw really shocked him. This was mid-1980s, and he was a civilian who was often contracted to do work for the military and had been called into a job at Edwards Air Force Base and was walking with his employer by a hangar, and he heard and almost felt this deep thrumming noise, and he's looking around to see where it's coming from. It's coming from this hangar, which is, they're walking right by it, and he looks through an open window, and it's a large window. You can see inside and gets a real shock. There is a UFO. He said it was small, like a Honda Accord is how he described it, but featureless, sort of metallic, and sort of like chrome, shiny, no features, oval shaped, floating. It was floating above the ground, though there were cables attached to it. And he stared at it just a few seconds in complete shock and turns to his employer and said, "What the heck is that?" And his employer turned and looked and turned a little pale. And basically, he didn't say a word. He just put his index finger to his lips and, motioning him to shut up.
Sure.
Do not say a word. And they walked off pretty quickly. And he turned to him again. He's like, "What's that? What's that?" And he says, "Nope, not going to talk about it. Would not talk about it." And absolutely refused to discuss it the entire time that he was employed there. And that would have been the end of it, except something happened a year or so later. This same employer called up the guy I interviewed again and said, "I need you to do a job. We need you. It's kind of an emergency. We've got nobody else. Please, can you help us out?" And the guy I interviewed said, "Nope, not going to do it. I'll only do it if you tell me what we saw." And so they got into a little bit of a argument, not really, but sort of a contest, if you will, and had lunch, drank a few beers, and talked about it. And finally, the guy relented and said, "Fine, I will tell you." And what he told him was that this was a part of the, quote, failed Star Wars program. And that this was not a UFO. This was not a captured alien craft. But what it was reverse engineered using extraterrestrial technology. And he went on to describe that this craft used sort of counter-rotating magnets to create a field outside the craft, which created a void, or I don't want to call it a black hole, but something along those lines, which would draw the craft in the desired direction of travel. So that was a pretty interesting case, and he felt like this is something that people need to know. And I agree, because when I heard Edwards, I'm like, oh, Edwards, okay. Because Edwards is neck deep in this subject. It really is. Back in 1947, there was a huge wave. I mean, this is right around the time of the Roswell crash. July of 1947, there's a huge wave over the base. It was seen by multiple officers. J. Allen Hynek of Blue Book was called to the case, and he ruled out any astronomical explanation. All the witnesses said it wasn't a plane. It was your classic flying saucer. And it really changed the way the Air Force dealt with UFO reports. It was from that particular sighting that started making them take this very seriously. And it just went on from there constantly over Edwards. And it wasn't just sightings, though there were many of them. There was a huge one in, I think it was 65, where it was caught on radar, and they were over the base for hours. But there was a very famous case in which a UFO actually landed at Edwards. Gordon Cooper, the astronaut, talked about this, went public. He was there when this thing landed, and it was filmed. It was actually filmed landing, and he developed the film, saw the film, called superiors. Superiors came and picked it up, told him never to talk about it, and they took it away, and that film has disappeared. And that's the film I want the government to disclose tomorrow.
Right.
Let's see it. Yeah.
It's funny. I often think about if those films are still around and they haven't been destroyed already. Are they sitting in a giant warehouse somewhere? Other pictures and like other videos and stuff of UFOs or aliens and things like that. Could you imagine being like the person that has access to that, or finding it one day? It's just like a room full of videos and all kinds of crazy things about UFOs. That would just be like one of the greatest finds ever.
Yeah. There are rooms and rooms filled with evidence out there, and some people have had access, but I think Senator Barry Goldwater tried to get access, and they denied it, would not give him access. But there are people who have definitely seen this stuff. It's my understanding Senator Bob Dole at one point was taken to Norton Air Force Base and observed a recovered UFO craft. This is sort of through the grapevine. But yeah, the Air Force knows what this is. They've known for a very, very long time. So they cannot tell us that, oh, we're not sure what it is, because they know. They've been reverse engineering it, for Pete's sake. I mean, come on.
So this is, I've always been under like the thought that they are actually here on Earth, and they are actually working with certain parts of the government. There's a base somewhere underground where they're just kind of down there helping us research and develop tech and like other flying machines of our own. It's just also interesting. I mean, there was a point in time where we made a jump from not being as technologically advanced as we are now to all of a sudden flying and computers, and just seemingly overnight. I mean, in the span of maybe 30 years or so, we went from not flying at all to like having jets and having all kinds of computers and all kinds of crazy things. That just didn't happen by us. There's obviously something else at work helping us out, passing along other tech and stuff like that. So
I mean, what Zeppelins, even those were invented in what, 1904, I think, 1903, allegedly.
Right.
But yeah, this last 120 years, the amount of technological progress is mind-blowing. And there are some whistleblowers who've said we've had help. Flat out, we have had help.
Yeah, it just kind of seemingly came out of nowhere all of a sudden. All started, I wouldn't say it started, but Nazi Germany, back in World War II, when they were building the Glocke and all that kind of stuff, and looking for aliens and all kinds of, they knew, what was going on. That kind of led me to believe that they were here prior to, and they were looking for help, and they were willing to share their tech and stuff. It's a good thing that the Nazis didn't get that built out the way they wanted to, or else we would all be speaking German right now. But yeah, so it's definitely crazy. There's a whole lot of things out there that would have alien, like they stamp their little, I guess, have their hand in it as well. They would help us out.
By the way, this is the anniversary of when the Air Force released their own version of the Roswell incident, calling it a mogul balloon, which is ridiculous. And I always, Roswell's kind of a dead horse. I mean, but it's still one of the biggest cases out there. I don't think it's going to go away. I want to see that craft in a museum. I really do. I think it's a real case. We've tracked pretty much every aspect of it. Researchers have, and that's what I think that they should reveal tomorrow. Tell us that the Roswell craft was real. There was that press release, you may remember, of course, and if that had just stayed out and said, that we've captured a flying saucer, that's what they said, and then they retracted it. If they had not retracted it, we'd be living in a very different world right now. I just really regret that they did that, and I hope that there's enough cases now that they'll never be able to backpedal again. I mean, there's just no way. The cat's out of the bag. The cover-up has been a disastrous failure. It's leaking in 1,000 places. A flood is occurring right now. You cannot hide this any longer. That's, I think, one of the driving forces behind disclosure. They're beginning to look like idiots by saying this is not real.
Yeah, I've always wondered why it's taken so long for them to just come out and admit it. I mean, obviously, people like yourself and other researchers, guys need no official proof from anybody. It would be great if they would come out and say, "Hey, this is legit." That would just lend credibility to everybody else out there, right? But like people like yourself, you don't need proof from the government that it exists. They've been trying to cover it up for years and years. But at the same time, we know that they've been covering it up because there's people out there that just don't believe. So those are the people that they're going after, right? And trying to verify everybody else who believes in it, everybody conspiracy theorists, and things like that. So there's obviously still like a group of the world that still doesn't believe in it. So they feel we'll just kind of keep it going until the wheels fall off.
Yeah.
And hopefully the wheels are actually falling off now. So like we said before, even with all this proof that's coming out, there's still people that just won't budge. They just won't, no matter what. Even if they were to come and walk through their front door and be like, "Hey, I'm here," right? They're just like, maybe the government created you guys, or like you're a robot. There's just things that would come out of people's minds, and it would just be they'll fight it to the grave. It's just how it's going to be.
That's why I'm excited. That's why I'm excited about this book, because I was able to include some whistleblower accounts. There was another guy who was actually involved in the Malmstrom incident of 1967, Malmstrom Air Force Base. You may have heard of that case where they shut down, literally pulled our nuclear ICBM missiles offline, and not just one or two, all of them. And they were, not connected to each other. They're at the same location, but these are independent systems. And one by one, they were shut down while UFOs were hovering over them and being viewed by many officers. Captain Robert Salas, was the first to go public in 1994, but there have since been a number of other witnesses. And the guy I interviewed, Mel Hansen, he heard about this in 2015 on TV, of all places, and realized, okay, I guess it's okay to talk about it, and started looking for someone who would listen, and actually had a little bit of trouble. He was got a lot of pushed around, and no one was listening to his testimony, but he found me. I'm like, are you kidding? I am definitely interested. And yeah, he had quite a story to tell. He was there. He saw it happen. He was out there at one of the missile sites when, this is late at night, a UFO shows up right over the missile. It's quite large. It's very low. It's blocking out the stars. The security officer with him is at a near panic, doesn't know what to do. They call the base itself, and they're sending out a Jeep, but it takes an hour to get there. This is an isolated location. And this object hovers over the missile and shuts it down. And of course, it goes up on backup power with a generator, a diesel generator. And Mel, the guy I interviewed, they told him, stay in your Jeeps, don't go out. Well, he goes out, he wants to get a closer look at this thing, because it was just staying there for a long time. It was not moving. So he gets out and he's looking at it, and the missile site goes offline again. It shuts down the diesel generator, and the missile site goes back online, with the fail safe. involving a battery power. And the UFO shut that down too. So it sort of went through all 3 fail safes. And now it was completely powered down. And at some point, the security guys arrived, said, "You are leaving now." And Mel was pulled off site back to the base itself. And the next morning, he was pulled into a room with a bunch of high-ranking officers and 2 guys in civilian clothes, he said, who he didn't know where they were from. But they told him in no uncertain terms, "You will lose your job if you say one word about this. Do not discuss it, not even with your spouse, your family, or your fellow officers. You are not to talk about it." And he obeyed them for the most part, though his best friend was one of his, team members, Dale Snyder, and they would secretly talk about it every now and then. But finally, because the government, they enacted an immediate cover-up of this. They did an investigation. We now have documents released through the Freedom of Information Act that have been declassified, pointing towards this incident, and they scrubbed any mention of UFO out of it. There's not one mention of the UFOs, but they did say all the missiles were shut down, and blamed it on something or other, a faulty switch and this and that. But they know, I mean, enough people saw this. It caused a lot of panic at high levels at Malmstrom. And the Malmstrom incident is not unique. This happened, at South Dakota. This happened, there was a case in Russia, actually, where they turned on the nuclear missiles. Anything with nuclear power, they are there. Like the Klamagor that I mentioned earlier, carried nuclear-tipped torpedoes. So anything involving nuclear power, the UFOs are there, and the Malmstrom incident, in my mind, is a clear message. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that when they're shutting them down, what they're doing, they're saying, "Why are you messing around with something that will kill all of you? It won't just kill your enemy, it's going to kill everything on Earth. What are you doing?" So I think that's the message from the ETs, and I think it points towards their agenda. I don't think it was a hostile act. I think it was a stern message saying, "Stop it. Stop playing with matches. You're gonna burn yourself."
Yeah, I can definitely attest to, like you mentioned, anything that has to do with nuclear, anything that's military. I worked at a nuclear site in South Carolina when I was in the Navy. Before my time there, I had always heard stories of things like in the water. It was the site that we had. It was right in this giant river right off the edge, and there would always be like Russian tankers that would be going by. We would always suspect of being spy ships and stuff like that. So this site was kind of like a heavy site, and prior to my time there was always rumors and like talk of things in the water. Like a lot of people seeing lights under the water. And we used to have boats in the water that would be patrolling that little section with giant M60 machine guns and stuff. So they're ready to go, but they would always see like lights at night under the water and see what they would. It would look like submarines in the water, but they weren't as long and stuff. They were just kind of like just weird ships in the water that they would see at night and stuff. So I have no doubt in my mind that there was something going on there prior to me arriving there, because I had never seen anything when I got there. But always like crazy stories about that area. It was in the middle of the woods too, so there's nothing out there. It was in the middle of the woods, and there's like this little side off the edge of the water. Just on the middle of nowhere, and it's definitely like a recipe for anything mysterious out there. There's definitely out there, but some crazy stuff. There's always a lot of weird things going on when it comes to nuclear, like any kind of facility, like you said.
Yeah, there was the Hudson Valley wave of the early and mid 1980s. That's another huge wave of sightings that was I'd love to hear how their government's explanation for this. They said it was ultralights. Yeah, right. One of these things hovered over the Indian Point nuclear power station over one of the reactors in particular. And after examining the reactor, they found a fault in it that needed to be repaired. So again, I think there was a clear message there. They've, a lot of nuclear reactors have sightings over them. There was one over the one here in California, the Diablo power plant, and definitely over anything industrial. I mean, they're there. Jim and Cora Lorenzen, they were pioneering researchers. They formed APRO, Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, which was the first civilian UFO research organization. And they were able to predict sightings whenever there was a new Air Force base being built or a factory or a power station. They said, just wait, there's going to be sightings. And sure enough, there were. They're watching us very closely, our technological progress and anything having to do with power of any kind, but especially nuclear power.
Yeah, we definitely don't know what we're doing with it. So it's definitely, for them, it's definitely something we'd be hovering over too, just to make sure that they don't blow each other up with it. So it's definitely crazy. I mean, we'll stick to that same theme there. So that story about the people that have the UFOs come out of the ocean and hover over those smokestacks. Remember that story?
Yeah, I sure do. 1997, August. This was a great case. I've done a lot of research into USOs, unidentified submersible objects, and I've never heard anything quite like this. This occurred in the Monterey Bay area. Multiple witness sighting. I always love it when I get a multiple witness case. Adds to the level of credibility. I was able to interview two of the witnesses, Joy Williams and her husband, Tom. Had gone over to a friend's house, which overlooks Monterey Bay. And they're about a quarter mile from the water. Enjoyed a meal, and Joy went out onto the deck afterwards just to look at the view and saw this glow in the water, this yellow-green glow, getting brighter and brighter and brighter right offshore. And coming out of the water was something weird. Wasn't a submarine, because it started to, come right out of the water and float above the water. The kelp, the seaweed was streaming off of it. It had portholes going around the circumference. It was a large kind of oval shape with portholes. And I mean, it's pretty far away, a quarter mile. She couldn't tell if it was making any noise or not, but she could clearly see it. And this thing started to move along the coastline towards the Moss Landing coal power plant. She, of course, called out her husband and the host, the ladies whose house it was. And they all three watched it. They had a telescope already ready and mounted. They ran to the telescope, watched this thing through the telescope, got a really close-up look. Joy did drawings of this, which I included in the book. And this thing made a beeline for the Moss Landing coal power plant and parks right at the top of the smokestacks there. And stayed there. I mean, it took it a good 15 minutes for it to get there. And it parks, this is a couple hundred feet high. And at this point, it's right next to the openings of the smokestacks. So she can tell how big it is, because the smokestacks are, so wide. And she's estimating it's at least 50, possibly as big as 100 feet across. And here's where it gets just strange. I've never heard of anything like this. This craft extended out an arm out of the far side of the craft, which went outside, bent upwards and over the craft itself, and started digging into the top of the smokestack with this giant claw, like a pair of pincers or something. And I don't know. I don't know what it was doing. I mean, I can only speculate whether it was putting something in there or taking something out or gathering samples. But it was clearly interested in what was going on with the Moss Landing power plant, and was there long enough where they called the police. And the police officer was like, okay, how can I help you? And they're like, well, we're seeing this thing. It's next to the power plant, and floating in the sky, and it's digging into it, and we think it's a UFO. And the officer, who had been very friendly, suddenly was not friendly anymore. He became somewhat truculent, really kind of hostile even, and basically told him, "You're seeing a boat. You're seeing a fishing boat." And we're like, "It's in the air. It's in the air." And he did not want to hear it. And the conversation became very awkward. And they basically ended the call. They called the radio station. No one had reported anything, because this thing should have been in, and it was obvious. A lot of people should be seeing this. This is not a rural area, or not super rural. There was quite a few homes. A lot of people should have been seeing this, but apparently no one did. I'm guessing people did, but they didn't call anyone. Or if they did, the police probably didn't talk. The radio station, said that they didn't receive any calls. Joy did end up reporting it to MUFON. She could not get it out of her mind. The lady who, had hosted the dinner refused to talk about it. She was really upset. They were all kind of shook up, because she's a Navy, or an Army brat rather, and knew her aircraft. She says, "This is nothing that we have, hands down." She knows her aircraft. So I don't know. I did some digging and I found something interesting. There have been a couple of three actually, other sightings in this exact area, right over the power plant. One involved a security officer who was patrolling the area and saw this white, he described it as an orb, and it was right over the power plant itself. Again, saw it twice over a period of over an hour. So something's going on there. I mean, I know of many cases actually where they've hovered over power plants. And one case that this really reminded me of was the Morenci copper smelting plant, where a large UFO hovered right over the smokestacks, same thing, and actually sent down a probe, a little orb, right into one of the smokestacks. So I think they're measuring pollution, or I don't know, something along those lines, monitoring, but it was clearly targeting the power plant itself.
So strange. I mean, it's definitely could be one reason. But it's just odd that they maneuver over areas like that and they actually watch what's going on there.
Yeah, they're very interested in all things human. I'm not sure why they're so interested in us and our planet, but they sure are. I mean, I've looked into that. They've collected animals. It's very well known. They collect plants of all kinds, flowers, grass, cactus, all kinds of plants, leaves. There was one case in South America where they kept stripping this lady's Swiss cheese plant in her yard of leaves. They returned like 2 or 3 times just to pick her, Swiss cheese, a philodendron, a split leaf philodendron. It's a pretty common house plant. It does have medicinal properties, supposedly, but they seemed very interested in it.
It's just, I don't know. It's definitely like a weird thing. But so we have a question here that's coming in our live site. Dolly's Free wanted me to ask you what you thought was the most significant UFO sighting in the last 20 years and why.
That's a hard question. The most significant in the last 20 years. Well, let me see. That would be from the year 2000 onward. There was that sighting over Turkey. I think you may have remembered that, where it was caught on film. That seems significant. That, I think, is one of what I would call a display, where they are purposefully showing themselves. I like that sighting because it was later analyzed in depth, using equipment and got a lot more detail that wasn't readily apparent in the first viewing of this film. And so that comes to mind. But there has been a constant parade, I guess, of sightings. There's Stevensville sighting in Texas. That was I'm not sure when that occurred, but it was relatively recent. It was the last really major wave. It seems like every 5 or 10 years, there's a sighting like, the Phoenix Lights, 1994, or Gulf Breeze, Hudson Valley. There was a major sighting over Wytheville, Virginia. Of course, the Topanga Canyon wave. But the Stevensville, Texas sighting, I like that one because that was seen by a lot of witnesses, and it was actually caught on weather station radar to the point that they were able to track this thing by the radar reports, and it matched exactly what the witnesses were seeing, some of whom were military people. And not surprisingly, the military did get involved and issued contradictory and frankly ludicrous explanations, calling it, what they said people were seeing was the afterburners of jets, which is ridiculous because at points this craft was very low. I mean, a police officer saw it right over his cruiser. One guy said he was threatened not to talk about it by military officials who came to his house and wanted to hear what he saw. So this was a big case, not too far from Crawford, by the way, Crawford, Texas, home of George Bush, and it appeared to be heading in that direction, according to the radar report. So there's been some speculation that this could have been one of ours, but I don't know. I suppose that's always a possibility. I think some of the triangular craft people are seeing, might be ours. There's a lot of buzz in the field about that, but the boomerang ones, which I think this was a boomerang, I don't think so. I don't think it was ours. Can't say for sure, but why would it be testing itself? Why would you test an advanced aircraft over a populated area? That's contrary to how the military, does their testing of advanced aircraft.
Texas is only about an hour and a half from here. George Bush has a nice fancy house in the middle of Dallas out here as well, where he spends a lot of his time right next to his presidential library that he has around the corner from his house as well. So that's good for him. But yeah, I mean, out here in Dallas, it's you don't get too many UFO stories. Obviously, like in the city, we have a lot of neighboring cities around here that are kind of get a lot of crazy stories.
Oh yeah, Texas is one of the top. I think it's among the top 5 producers in the U.S. California is first. I think Washington is up there. I believe Texas is third. That may have changed a while since I'm going by the reports from NUFORC, National UFO Reporting Center in MUFON. But yeah, Texas has got a lot of sightings.
We have, so like I'm originally from El Paso, which is way West Texas, as west as you can get. That's right on the border. A lot of UFO stories that come out of that city once you cross the border. That's Juarez, Mexico. And the area there is a lot of witchcraft and a lot of crazy cryptid stuff, UFOs and things like that, all along the border. Because coming from El Paso this way to Dallas, you can go, I think it's about 800 miles of just pure nothingness, a whole lot of desert, and there's nothing really in between but like small cities here and there. So there's just a lot of room out there for a lot of crazy things to happen. Nobody would even know.
Yeah, I'm kind of upset that UFOs get lumped into the paranormal because it's not paranormal at all. Paranormal is just a word for something we don't understand. I think there's explanations for everything, and I think we've got a pretty good handle on what UFOs are. I think most investigators who are really digging into this come up with the same stuff. We know what happens when someone is taken on board a craft. It follows a pretty set pattern. Of course, each case is unique, and there's a bell curve, I guess, of the types of encounters people would have. But overall, I'm really encouraged. I don't think these guys are hostile. I don't think it's a threat. There's a threat narrative being put forth, which is ludicrous. It's just not true. If these guys were truly a threat, do you think we'd be here by now? I mean, honestly, they are very advanced. That's the one thing I think pretty much all investigators agree upon, and experiencers. These guys are very advanced technologically, and I think spiritually follows along with that. But if you look at what actually happens to people who have contact, I'm very encouraged. I've wrote a book on healing cases because this is a very prominent feature of what happens to people when they're taken on board. They are healed. This is why I am not afraid of UFOs. I don't think they're a threat. When people talk to ETs, the messages are very much the same. It's like, what are you doing with nuclear power? Honest to God, the Malmstrom incident speaks to that, but people are told flat out, face to face, about the dangers of nuclear power, about the dangers of our warlike ways. One lady I interviewed, I call her Lynette, she got a lot of information from the Greys. They told her flat out, you must tell people that the power of intention is real, that thoughts are things, and that if you keep putting out the greed, corruption, and negativity that you guys are putting out, you will destroy your planet like we did. That's what they told her. They told her that they've been around for a very long time. People have mistaken them for angels, but that was actually them. I don't know, but this is what they said. And they told her that they've been manipulating human genetics for years and years, and also the genetics of animals. They told her specifically they've upgraded the genetics of dogs and cats, upgraded their emotional intelligence so that they could relate better to humans. I found that very interesting. They gave her all kinds of prophecies, which came true. They told her Hurricane Katrina was nothing, that hurricanes would become much worse, and they have. They told her people should start disappearing from this planet, which is happening. I mean, if you've heard of this missing 411 phenomena, a lot of missing people. They told her people should start disappearing from this planet. It's being done for the universal good. It's them, and it's being done for humanity's benefit. They're taking people off planet. And this is not the only person who's told me this. I think they will intervene in this. If there were to be an existential crisis, where the life on Earth is threatened at large, we got to be ready. There could be a mass landing. This is not out of the realm of possibility. At some point, there will be open official contact. People really need to wake up. We need to start coming together. We need to work on ourselves, sort of wake up. This is the main ET agenda, is trying to wake people up psychically, wake us up to the fact that we can do telepathy. We can be empathetic. We can relate to each other in a loving, compassionate way. We don't need to have wars. We don't need to pollute our planet. We don't need fossil fuels. They are doing their best to save us from ourselves without actually taking over, because we do have to solve our own problems. Like every parent knows, you can't just lead your children and do everything for them. They have to learn how to tie their own shoes. They have to. And that's what I think the main ET agenda is. And this is why I'm so encouraged. Yeah, it can be very scary meeting ETs, but people who overcome their fear have much more profound, interactive, benevolent experiences. And that's what my research is showing. I think that's what other researchers who are really digging into this, people like Barbara Lamb is one I would cite in particular. We talk every now and then, and it's amazing how much our cases match up.
Yeah. For the future, I mean, hopefully with all this disclosure lately, something huge comes out of it. Saying previously, a lot of people like yourself and other researchers don't need proof that it's out there. You guys know it is, but they definitely help out the rest of the world. Say definitely they're out there, and this is where they're coming from. This is what they're here for, and what they're doing. That would definitely help out in the long run for a lot of people. Yeah, it's definitely advantageous for us, but I don't think I'd be able to get over reading a 15-foot tall praying mantis. that would still give me nightmares. But yeah, I mean, hopefully one day. You always see like all these movies about like, Star Trek and stuff, and Star Wars, where they obviously they're out in the universe and they come across all these different races of aliens and such, and it's like some crazy looking ones. Hopefully, one day we get to a point where that's possible and it's not still frightening anymore. It's like another person that we're familiar with and such. But it'll definitely, hopefully, it'll happen in our lifetime. But it doesn't hard for the future that it actually comes true.
Yeah, I think it will. I mean, there's another case in the book, the last chapter. It's really one of my favorite, involving this lady, who's married, has 2 kids, and it's a long story. But long story short, she is in touch with this gray alien and was able to communicate with him telepathically and had a very long conversation with him. He introduced himself and said his name was Sen, and they proceeded to have a really long conversation. She's like, "Why are you taking me?" And he told her that we need your genetics because we have lost the ability to reproduce, and we are reinserting emotions into our genetics because we have sort of genetically bred them out at some point. And he told her that they are essentially human, that they once looked like her and are trying to get back to that. She asked them, why are you planning on taking over Earth? And he said, no, you guys are far too violent, and there are plenty of other planets out there that are available. We don't need your planet. And yeah, I had a long conversation with her. He said that we are very, very physical, very based on a low vibrating frequency, and that we need to raise our frequency up. And they're almost quasi-physical, is how he put it, and almost ethereal in a way, and are able to travel interdimensionally, but are trying to reinvigorate their genetics. That's one of their main missions here, which is something I've heard from many other contactees.
Right. Yeah, I mean, hopefully we do make it off the planet one day. We're definitely going to need to. The way things have been going lately, if it's any indicator of what's to come in the near future, it's not like it's a good. We need to start making plans to figure out another way to do it, and if that means leaving Earth, to the galaxies or wherever, definitely needs to start happening a lot sooner than later. So here's to that. Here's to look into the future. But yeah, Mr. Dennett, I really appreciate the time. As we're winding down here, where can people get your book? Is it only on Amazon, or can they find that on your website as well?
Yeah, I do have a website. I've got excerpts there. You can buy the book through the website if you want. Just use the search engine on my name. It should take you right there. It's also available, on Amazon, other online retailers. And yeah, I think this is an important subject. People may not believe in UFOs. You may not have seen one, but I can tell you confidently that this is affecting your life. There is a cover-up. That's not speculation. That's demonstrable. The people who are in power are covering this up for reasons of control and greed. I think it's a constitutional crisis. We could solve a lot of problems if we would just release what is basically free energy devices. We could clean up our environment. We wouldn't have any energy crisis or this sort of fabricated economic crisis. We don't need any of this. I don't think we, at some point, if our governments across the world don't shape up, we're not going to need them. We are going to look to each other to lead ourselves, which is the way it should be. We are autonomous beings. We don't need the government to disclose. We don't, because they're not doing it. So why would we even look to them for leadership if they are not leading us? It's time that we lead ourselves, all come together and just love, compassion, and truth. Let love and truth guide us and we'll be just fine. And that's what I think the ETs are really trying to get us to do, is just to wake up to our own personal power. And we can do it. All we have to do is try.
Be working out and seeing what's going to actually becoming of all this disclosure here. Seem to be wrapping up pretty quickly. Hopefully we get some pretty significant information here soon. Mr. Dennett, I really appreciate your time. You jumping on and discussing your new book with us. Really appreciate that. For you guys that want to buy the book, like you mentioned, also you can find it on his website, which we'll have a link down below as well. Author of 26 books. His latest one, Wondrous, 25 True UFO Encounters. Mr. Dennett, appreciate your time, sir. You stay safe out there. Stay blessed. Everybody else, if you guys are going to check out the podcast, you want to catch us on the go, like I mentioned before, you can find us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, as well as iHeart Radio. If you aren't already a subscriber on the YouTube channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for us. Hit the like button as well and the bell icon so you don't miss an episode in the future. If you have any questions or comments from myself or our guests, or topic recommendations, you can shoot us an email at thetruthofender1776@gmail.com. Really appreciate you guys stopping in. Stay tuned. We were kind of slacking on episodes lately for the past few months or so, at least. Things have been kind of hectic. School and stuff is finally over next month, so that'll be good to get out of the way. Work's been kind of hectic, work life, and personal life as well. So everything's getting sorted out. We'll be back up and running as well. Be showing out some more shows for you guys as well. Everybody on Twitch that tuned in, I really appreciate you guys as well. We kind of started out this new thing on Twitch, so we weren't really kind of sure how it was going to go, but first time up, and I think it went pretty well. So, always free. Really appreciate you stopping in as well. Thanks for your question. So yeah, guys, appreciate it. You guys stay safe out there, stay blessed, and most importantly, stay frosty.